wargame anytime. Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Any Wargame Anytime. My name's Bozz, and I'm back here today to keep talking to you about Warhammer 40k 3rd edition. So the unboxing video I put out a couple of weeks ago has had some really great responses. It's easily the most viewed and most liked video that the channel's ever put out, and that has a lot to do with the fact that people are really into 3rd ed for whatever reason. A lot of people have a lot of nostalgia around it. A lot of people think it's a more streamlined version of the game. And I put a question out there, do I build this box or do I leave it as an intact piece of my own personal history? And overwhelmingly the response was, yeah, you should definitely just build it. But I'm still quite hesitant to do so, just because of that nature of it being this piece of, my own personal background in wargaming. And I thought, why not have my cake and eat it too? I've got a 3D printer. In fact, I have two. I've got a resin printer and a filament printer. So I decided that what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to 3D print the entire contents of the 3rd edition starter box. So that's all of the models, all of the terrain, all of the templates, the reference sheets, the readme first, everything. So it's a little more ambitious than I thought it was when I first set out, which is often the case. There were certain models that were quite easy to get a hold of. There were certain models that I thought were going to be quite easy to get a hold of and were just an absolute nightmare. But the idea of doing this has really caught fire in my mind, so I set off to do it. I'll say this right from the outset: because of Games Workshop's heavy-handedness when it comes to shutting down creators who model miniatures, I'm not going to be explicit about where some of these models came from and who the creators are, because I want to support the community and I don't want anyone else to get shut down. If you happen to see one of your designs on here and you want to be credited, get in touch with me and I will credit you in the description straight away, no problem. So first off, I went looking for Dark Eldar, and they weren't too difficult to find. I did manage to find a really good builder that was going to allow me to pose them in a multitude of ways, which is what I raved on about in the unboxing video, about what I liked so much about those models in that box, is that there was no one way to do them. You could put them together however you want. So yeah, they weren't too difficult to find, and I got them in the slicer, and I made sure that everything was scaled correctly. I made sure that all the files were intact. There weren't any kind of little problems in them that cause issues when printing. And yeah, you can see from the screenshots that I managed to get the entire 20 model complement into 2 batches. So they should take me, I don't know, around about 12 hours to print out both of those. And so those done, I thought, wonderful, let's move on to the Marines. Firstborn Marines, how hard can it be? And that's where I first started running into problems. I did manage to find, after not too long, a bunch of files with a bunch of different armor types, your Mark IIs up to your Mark 8 power armors, and found a pretty close match for the Marines from the starter box. For the 7 of them that were just standard Marines with bolters, almost no problem at all. There were 3 things that really, really made this a long process. The first was a Space Marine Sergeant's head. So the Space Marine Sergeant with his bolt pistol and his chainsword came together fine. It was included in that kind of builder that I found. But they were all helmeted heads. And it was surprisingly difficult to find a firstborn Space Marine Sergeant head. It took me the better part of a day to hunt it down. I was putting in all sorts of different search terms, and checking all sorts of different places and forums that I'm on and things like that. And yeah, it was pretty difficult. I don't know why, but I did manage to find that sergeant's head. So then we moved on to the problem of the flamer. So finding a second edition style marine with a flamer was easy. They are everywhere. The internet is awash with second edition style marine flamers. Problem is, that's the wrong type of flamer. It looks dorky, and I wanted to have it as correct to the box as possible. So again, I went hunting. I found a few different examples of just the flamers, but then I had the problem of finding the extra arm to hold them. This was another day. Yeah, probably another day of searching, and I did eventually find something in a Primaris builder that was the right style of flamer, so I was able to import that into the slicer and rescale it down to fit in with my firstborn marines. And so that was that solved. Now the last piece of the marine puzzle was the missile launcher. And this took about 3 days, which is ridiculous, but there it is. So again, the internet is awash with the style of missile launcher from the second edition box set, with the launcher mounted on the shoulder and there's a button being held. And I've had lots of those in the past. I think I've still got a couple of second edition marines with missile launchers kicking around someplace, but they're not what I wanted. They're not at all what I wanted. And try as I might, when I was searching for firstborn missile launcher, it was impossible. Nothing was coming up. You can see from one of the photos I've got up now, that's the kind of missile launcher that I was finding. I had my photo for reference that I wanted. I had another photo for reference that I didn't want. And I went searching. I searched high and low. I got to all corners of the internet. And boy, that was a bit of a journey in and of itself. But eventually, what I managed to find was this. And that's about as close as I was able to get. The backpack is wrong. I'm pretty sure that's a Devastator backpack instead of just the standard backpack that the Marine in the starter box comes with. And you can see the helmet, he's also a beaky. And yeah, there aren't any beakies in the third edition starter box, but the pose for the missile launcher is correct. There's also a mark on the shoulder pad that I'm going to have to go into Blender and remove, because all of the shoulder pads that I'm printing out are blank shoulder pads. But at long last, I had my firstborn missile launcher and my firstborn flamer and my firstborn sergeant's head. So I was finally able to get everything in the slicer, get them all in there. And again, it's going to be over a couple of prints because my build plate isn't huge. But that's fine. That's fine. I got them. They exist. And we were able to move on. And so the land speeder wasn't too difficult to find. The land speeder came up pretty quickly on one of my groups. The only challenge was getting the right land speeder that just has the mounted heavy bolter or multi-melter without any of the other, missile launcher racks or any of the low-hanging weapons or anything like that, because of course the one in the box is just the most basic one. But I was able to find one without too much trouble, and then I was also able to find a really cool base for it. So obviously I haven't got the clear plastic base that's in the box, but that's okay because I did find a super cool base to go on the land speeder. So that's all the models down. Moving on to finding the trees. There were a couple of different tree files that I was able to find in pretty short order. It wasn't too difficult. It was more just getting the right search terms is a lot of what this is. And the search term was modular palm trees, I think is what I ended up going with. And there were a few different options that came up. One that looked quite good, but it was really designed for my FDM printer, and you had to physically kind of heat and bend the leaves at the end of the process, because obviously they're going to print straight on an FDM printer. And I wasn't comfortable with doing that. I could see that becoming a real frustration real fast. So I did find this other set that were much more expensive, but much more modular and much closer, I think, to what is in the actual box. So putting them in the slicer and making sure that I had, the right amount of bases, the right amount of kind of segments and leaves and things, took a little bit of time. Took maybe 3 or 4 hours to do that, because, I'm trying to get this exact. I'm trying to recreate this box. But they got done, and they're going to be printed in a couple of different segments as well. Moving on to the ruins, I actually managed to find almost straight away proper recreation of some 3rd edition starter set ruins that someone had kind of modelled up and put out there for people, and there it is. That was almost the easiest part of the whole process, and they look so good. They're obviously different from the ones in the box, but they're so close, and I'm really happy that they were so easy to find. The tank traps and barricades were kind of more difficult to find for whatever reason, probably just because they're scatter terrain and it's not such a high demand item, I suppose. I also managed to find a couple of those little pieces of rubble that come in the box as well. They're not kind of ruin rubble. I looked high and low for a good couple of hours for the right kind of rubble, and then I just found some that were piles of kind of fallen masonry and bricks. And they were the right scale and they were the right size, and I thought, you know what, that is absolutely good enough. That is not going to make or break my box at all. Ditto the barrels. I've got a bunch of barrel files lying around from earlier prints anyway, so they were already there. They've got a nice little aquila on top, or a skull or something, I think. I forget which. But there we go. That's the box. I was able to scan in the README first from the box. I'm also planning on scanning in the Troll magazines that were in there, just because I love them and they add so much to it, and why not have them? And I've also got the images of the reference sheets as well. So the box will have everything. It'll have the models, it'll have the terrain, it'll have the templates. I'll chuck a couple of dice in there. I've got any amount of dice. I could 3D print off dice if I really wanted to, but I don't think that's really necessary. I cannot find, for the life of me, a file for that long, thin ruler. I also haven't got a big enough 3D printer to print something that big. They go for a ridiculous amount on eBay, so I'm not touching that. I'm just going to make a nice little Grimdarky style ruler and pop it in that box as well. As for the actual rulebook, they still go pretty cheap on eBay for pretty good condition. So I think for this project what I'm going to do is actually buy myself another 3rd ed rulebook and just pop it in the box. It shouldn't cost me more than 15 quid. Onto the box itself. I haven't got the box I'm going to use yet, but when I do get it, what I'm going to do is have the original box art, front and back, top and bottom, printed out, and I'm just going to simply glue it on there. Hopefully it won't look too terrible, but it'll be a proper recreation of the box. It might not be the right size or anything. Some of the things inside are going to be different. There's going to be no sprues, but it's going to be the 3rd edition box. And then once I've got it, I can paint it up and start playing some games with it. So that's the project. And it's been really exciting gathering everything up and getting ready for printing. I've got a couple of real-world life things coming up that mean that I won't be able to get started on the printing until the end of the month. But I'm really excited about going through this process and, gathering it all from scratch and building it and painting it and just getting going with it. I'm really happy to be able to have my cake and eat it too. And I love that 3D printing gives me the chance to do that. So this is going to be a nice little video series about that process. This has been kind of the intro video and gathering the resources and everything. The next video will be about the process of printing it and getting them together and everything like that, and then there'll be painting, and then there'll be gaming. Also, at the end of the series, I'll go through the costs involved in terms of both money and time. I'm keeping a running tally of how much time I'm spending on literally every aspect of this project, and also how much money I've spent on things like the models themselves, like the STL files for them, and the amount of resin and filament being used. So, yeah, stay tuned. It's going to be a hell of a lot of fun. And until next time, go where the game is good.